We've seen also Rudiger play out wide as well as a wing back. It's an option. I'm not saying it's an ideal option. Look, like all these options are not ideal options, to be clear. Fede Valverde is obviously another one that is probably, there's no question Fede Valverde at some point will play again at right back because Vasquez cannot play every single game and he's the only one. I Your point about Jesus Fortea, I think at some point we have to give him a look. It's really interesting, isn't it? That we would have never seen Raul Asensio. It had to take rock bottom emergency DEFCON 1 for us to be like, all right, we have no one else. Go ahead. Show us what you got so we can just bench you next game. Then he's great. And they had no choice but to just continue rewarding him with minutes. Also on the, Jose, remember we talked about this before the game. I wasn't surprised at all that Tchouameni started this game because Tchouameni is just not going to be benched in a big game with Carlos' circle of trust.
Yep.
Carlos' circle of trust is very interesting. It takes a lot to get in, but once you're in, you're in. And Tchouameni is not going to be out of that circle for a long time. But it's just amazing to see Raul Asensio's emergence here, and it's such a key moment in the season, but also like for the next couple of years too, because his emergence also will affect how the board dips their toes into the transfer market for the center back situation. But yeah, I would give Jesus Fortea a look. I think it's worth a shot.
Yeah, one of the things that I was discussing with people that I found interesting, some people were like, maybe we shouldn't shift Tchouameni to center back because then we're not gonna buy a center back, which is something that could happen. But it like the phenomenon of Tchouameni at center back is quite interesting because it feels like it feels like certain things that are not even position dependent, he still does better at center back. Like
yes.
the defend, it's almost like there he knows he's the last line of defense, so he's more switched on defensively in these situations. Of course, because he's a bit further away from the press, he's more comfortable in making the line breaking passes because of course when he's in midfield he has to receive a bit more with his back turned, so he's been struggling a bit more right now with that. It's for now like a change that benefits him a lot. And even though yes, I would have liked Asensio to see a bit more game time, I think it was the right decision to put him in today. I think the priority, like what was interesting looking at the lineup, I think there's a lot of interesting tactical stuff today from this lineup and from the way the team played. Because first of all, Tchouameni is still in the circle of trust, but he wasn't in the circle of trust for midfield, which I still think is kind of a significant change. Like Carlo went into this game thinking this guy is not going to survive the press in midfield, so we're going to put him at center back. Because if he really wanted to use him at midfield, then he would have fielded Asensio at center back and put, like if he considered that Tchouameni was so important in midfield. But he kind of knew that he wasn't delivering the goods in midfield with the ball. So I thought that the move, so then you move him back to center back where he's actually doing a pretty good job with the line breaking passes. And then you put Ceballos in, who's probably one of our most reliable guys right now against the press. And I do think it was a good change. And the other really neat thing tactically today is how, so we've been struggling a lot with build-up sequences this season, post-Kroos. There's been, again, it's a bit of an issue of who becomes our new leader in build-up, and it looked like Camavinga could be that guy, but then he gets injured. So the solution today was actually to get the forwards a lot more involved. And you saw it a lot, for example, with Brahim in the first half, where we had a lot of situations where what was happening is that, the way we were trying to break through the Atalanta press is get kind of a ball in between their lines to one of the forwards and kind of hope the forward is going to do like a miracle turn under pressure. And the guy who was getting those off consistently was Brahim. And there were several sequences where we could turn, where we could beat the press, turn, and start running at them because of what Brahim was doing. So that was super important. Then, and then Vini, especially in the second half, started doing a bit more of those sequences too and coming in deeper. So this was a change I found very interesting tactically, because we got the forwards more involved in possession, and we try to use that for build up and to beat their press. And the other last tactical change I found interesting is that this time around, so we had Ceballos and Fede covering for the fullbacks in this case, which I thought was a neat change because it actually took defensive responsibility away from Jude. Because again, one of the big trends this season that I think has been like a negative trend for us is that we force Jude to do so much defensive coverage that he cannot do attack. And it feels like this time around, and Carlo made a change that try to free up Jude and let him attack more. So all in all, this is kind of the summary of a lot of good tactical things that I saw today. I think Carlo took his gambles with the lineup, and I think the gambles worked.
The Tchouameni thing is interesting because even at the end of last season, if you told me that Ceballos would be a better option in build up and like just overall for the team, I would have been a little surprised.
Yeah.
Also, the Tchouameni the first 3 months would have started and cooked against Atlanta. Like so that's where I'm still confused. And I think I mean the main thing I hope from a club perspective, I think this is an interesting thing because how it shapes our season, because like Ceballos is closer to Modric and Cruz maybe in profile than Tchouameni, the way he's playing in build up. And I'm gonna share my screen real quick. I did a little comparison chart right when the game ended, trying to kind of put into, I'm not saying this is accurate, but like Fede is a good ball carrier. He's decisive and he's good in the first phase. But why does it feel like when Ceballos plays with him, he's so much better than Tchouameni? And I think it's because Ceballos has a little bit of pausa. Like he's closer to Modric in terms of that, like the game freezing around him than Fede and Tchouameni arguably. And he's a little more consistent. And I guess with Tchouameni, the pausa is variable. Some games he has it, some games he doesn't. With Fede, I'd say it's average. It's also variable where like some games I feel like he really does become a build-up leader and others he doesn't. And I think the answer is like Ceballos is like slightly better in the second phase. The game comes a little slower to him because he's not like Cruz though. He's not like dominating the game for us. But the few simple things he does better make the whole team function way, way better than when Tchouameni's there. And it's just so subtle and interesting to me that that's been the case. But regarding Tchouameni, now I think they're trying to figure out, like, you know, is he worth it at center back, or is he worth, or do we get 90 million and just sign a center back? I think that's their thought process with him now, because there are teams that'll pay that much for him. My only hope is that maybe under a different coach, he could get a chance. But I think at Real Madrid, like, you know, time is not something you get that much of all the time. And, you know, the win, it might be like, this is the first time I feel like this game is a landmark moment where I don't know if he makes it a DM. Like Carlo played him at center back in a big game because he trusts him there. I don't see him making a back end at DM in a big game anymore.
Not well. It will depend on Camavinga's health in that point. But I think this is fascinating because your question about like should Real Madrid splash on a new center back or just convert him, I think the answer will come down to what will he be okay with? Would he accept that? And we know that he doesn't like playing center back, or at least maybe, I don't know if that's the right wording, but there were definitely reports earlier last season where, you know, he's like, I'll do whatever the team needs me to do, but I am a DM. I'm not going to play center back every game. But at some point, like he's played good at center back so much that I think as a club, you have to consider it. And he has to consider it because seems to be really good there. And my theory on why he looks better there is in part, there are two things. One is that he's already kind of in position to defend the box, whereas in a DM position, he has to be more cognizant of both tracking runners, but also shielding zone 14. And then the build-up phase, and actually his player profile is that he is a good player in progressive passing. But I think also from this situation, there's less reliance on him because often the pivot has to drop in between the center backs and distribute, and there's more onus on him. And he doesn't have that onus from this position either. So I think those are the two main things as to why he looks better at center back. And he's such a good aerial presence in general that he's strong in those clearances. But I'm at a stage now where I'd literally take him aside and be like, listen, these are all the great DMs in football history who converted to center back. You should watch some Franz Beckenbauer compilations on YouTube. He could play both DM and CB. Fernando Hierro went from DM to CB. Ivan Helguera, not on their level, but very successful as well. I think it's time for you to move to your center back phase and really own it. And it's going to be great. You might even, win a Ballon d'Or playing center back. Who knows? Just try to convince them. But, if in that theoretical situation, if you had like Tchouameni permanently center back and Raul Asensio emerging, at least for this season, it lessens the need a little bit. But it's really interesting. The other thing I just wanted to say, like I was just taking mental bullet points notes from what Jose was saying earlier about Brahim. Totally agree that if it wasn't for his first touch out of pressure in the first half, we don't escape a lot of those pressing sequences. So he was very very, very key. And I think his legs just kind of failed him towards the second half, and it looked like he was just getting tired. He was losing possession a little bit easier and all that stuff.